Welcome back to Power in Politics and the Power Panel, plus CBC Polls analyst Eric Grenier, who's here to jump in to talk about party fundraising with us. Eric has taken a look at the federal party's fundraising pocketbooks, and he joins us. Sum up for us, if you don't mind, Eric, what you found.
Well, these are the annual filings that each riding association in the country does. Now, not all of them have filed, but the vast majority have. And what the numbers show is that the Liberals actually have raised the most money at the riding level. They raised about $5 million in 2017 at the riding association level, compared to about $2 million for the Conservatives and just under $1 million for the NDP. They also show, though, is that the Conservatives actually have the most resources in those ridings. That they have over $20 million tied up in their riding associations in terms of their assets, whereas the Liberals have over $12 million and the NDP just at around $3 million. So there is some big differences with those numbers. And there are a few ridings that stand out, and they're kind of interesting. The top riding in the country, the top riding association that raised the most money was the Liberal one in Calgary Centre. It's Kent Hare's riding. Raised $150,000 in 2017. The top 6 ridings were all Liberal ridings. And then after that, the top Conservative riding was actually also Calgary Centre, even though they don't have the MP. And then the top NDP one was Burnaby South, where Kennedy Stewart will be running for the mayoralty of Vancouver. The richest riding was Calgary Heritage, $370,000 in assets. That's Stephen Harper's old riding. Justin Trudeau came in 4th. He had just under $300,000. The top NDP riding, again, we see a little bit of an odd pattern here, was a Regina Louvan. That's Aaron Weir's riding. So he is no longer an NDP MP sitting with the CCF.
He'll be raising money for the CCF now.
Revival of the party.
Revival of the
Interesting. Okay, Françoise, what do you take from that?
Oh, so many things come to mind at this point in time, because that's a lot of information, but sometimes numbers don't say the reality behind it. I remember, I think it's in 2008, I was shortly after the election, I was looking into my adversaries or in my region who was donating, because it's all public information. And I was fascinated to see that a Conservative candidate in, let's say, Pontiac here was receiving donations from a Canadian, a Calgary person as a Conservative donation. So there's a lot of games being played legally. I'm not saying it's not legal, but sometimes parties decide what they want to do with their money. There's questions of transfer from parties to the ridings. There's also the fact for the Liberals that if they want to be nominated and have a nomination, they have to raise a certain amount at the local. So it's kind of an incentive to mostly do fundraising constantly. When I was an MP, I hated it. Can I be very frank? It's the part of politics that I hate so much. I had my hugest debate with Brad Levine that comes here, because he was a true believer that if you spent all the limit that you were entitled to, it was almost a guarantee to win. And because you don't spend exactly the maximum, that's why they came short in certain rights. And it's so not true, because in 2011, look at what we did as NDP in Quebec with no money. We won pretty much everything. So it goes with ideas. I just hate
Though I do share your lack of enthusiasm for having to ask people for money, but I will defend the principle of fundraising. And the numbers are important because it's an indicator, not the only one, but it's an indicator notably at the local level of the health of your organization. When you're a candidate and you want to be able to, you have to sell the message and sell yourself, you need tools to be able to do that. So therefore you need money. So you have to raise money, and it's a healthy thing in democracy for that to happen. So to be able to see that local riding associations are doing well with fundraising, that's a good sign. And if it's not, then you should be concerned as to what's happening. I mean, 2019 is around the corner. So you've got to be able to make sure that you've got your stuff together. When you come in anywhere as a candidate, you want to make sure that not only you know your stuff, but you have a good organizing team and that you have money. So for sure, it's a good sign for nationally for Conservatives to see that they're for the second year in a row that they're on top. Liberals are doing well with respect to local ridings. The NDP's got to be able to pick that up. But of course, it's always related to how the party is doing as well, because you've got to be able to incite people to give you money, right?
Given the timing of the election, as Yolande mentioned, in 2019, how much do you read into the numbers, Rick?
Oh, well, there's obviously a lot of financial momentum behind the two of the parties. The NDP does have a pretty serious, the financial numbers for the NDP are very weak, 1/10 of the other parties. that's a big warning signal to that party that it needs to fix something, get some more momentum on the fundraising side. For the other two parties, that's what we're talking about here basically is, to boil it down to its simplest thing, a lot of money. You know, the Conservative money, $20 million in the ridings, is an average of about $70,000 per riding. That's most of what you need to run. That's most of the limit that you're allowed to spend.
Exactly.
That you're allowed to spend, which is give or take $100,000 per riding. And you know, they've got another year, and most riding associations, most candidates have the ability to raise enough money to spend the limit just during the 30-day campaign. So the fact that they're going into the election year with almost their campaign paid for already means the system's quite flush. And I know this is all very mysterious to Canadians, but you know, when you kind of look at the tax credits that people get for making contributions and the rebates that candidates get from their election expenses, basically it works out that candidates need to raise about 10 cents for every dollar that they spend. The other 90 cents come in the form of tax credits or election rebates. So we've got a very democratic system in Canada of election financing between the limits and the contribution and the tax credits and the rebates. And you can see it's working here right now.
Do you agree with that assessment as far as, Eric, the numbers guy, as far as how it positions everybody going into 2019?
Well, yeah, you obviously need to have that money at the local level. And we do see that there is, as Françoise mentioned, there's some transfers. You see the Conservatives actually transfer a lot more of their money to their ridings than the Liberals do, whereas the Liberals do seem to have a bit more of a focus on trying to raise that money at the local level, which maybe...
What's the thinking behind
well,
it?
the thinking might be that it does help with organization for the team, whereas the Conservatives, if it's done nationwide, they can then put the resources where it's needed most. But as Françoise mentioned, in 2010, before the 2011 election, the Bloc Québécois had about $3 million in assets in its ridings, and the NDP had about $130,000. Wow. Most of it was in Tom Mulcair's riding, or a big chunk of it, and in the end, of course, it didn't matter. So it all depends on the election. If it's a change election, a wave election, having money, having a good team on the ground won't matter that much. But if it's a close election, and the next one could be one of those that's won in just a few regions, few ridings, that's when the organization could really pay dividends.
Those Calgary Centre numbers are really indicative of what a battleground riding Calgary Centre is going to be. It's one of only two ridings that the Liberals are holding, and the Conservatives are dedicated to trying to get that riding back.
Do you think they'll have any success?
Well, it's been traditionally a Conservative riding, so. You know.
Well, there's lots of money there.
Eric is the expert on election predictions.
It does look like it's hotly contested, that's for sure.
I think there'll be the limit spent on
both
either
sides.
party. I have no doubt about
It'll be
it.
interesting if it makes a difference, because money can make a difference, like we just discussed.
But one statistic in your numbers that you showed in the article, Eric, is my ex-colleague Kennedy Stewart. I was not surprised, but I'm impressed because he's got a lot of donators. Because it's one thing to have, I mean, a Conservative or a Liberal can do one soirée where everybody gives the maximum. I think it's 1,200 now. NDP, the number of mini pot barbecues, corn, and things like that, where you raise minimum, but you gain so many people on the. So we'll see what happens in.
I've unfortunately got to cut the conversation short, but I appreciate it. Thanks, Yolande, Rick, Françoise, and Eric. Appreciate your time today.